call them next year. All right. But someone gave the advice. Right, doing it outside, have it more of a nature. Let me start off this discussion with a certain something that happened to me recently. So one of the things that I do, or I used to do, at least last year, we engage with people online. So as you know, with the pandemic, there was one-to-one interaction or just personal interaction with that alone. And so I want you to think about a person who accepts Islam. How much this means to this person. How beautiful is it that when you have a person that comes that's been living their life with kind of existential darkness, like they were searching and then they find Islam. Is that a beautiful thing? What do you think? It is. It's beautiful, right? Because this person was in the darkness of who knows what, coming from where. So I'm online and I'm chatting with a person. And this person says that I was in dire straits when it came to my soul. And I love Islam and I accepted Islam. And I was like very happy. As any Muslim should be, and I was elated. I'm very strange too though. I see Muslims that get excited even after however long it's been, 20-some years, and my wife thinks it's a bit strange. But, it's like, oh, Muslim. It's not something strange anymore, right? So this person said yes, but there's something that I'm struggling with. Now we're all hopefully mature enough here, and listen to what this person said, what they're struggling with. This is what I really want you to pay attention to, and it'll give you an idea of what we're going to be speaking about, inshallah, hopefully. This person said to me that when I accepted Islam, when I found Islam, I was in the middle of gender reconstruction. Does anyone know what that is? And hormone therapy. Okay, what that means is that this person was one gender, and they thought, as in perhaps some of the cultures that are surrounding us, that they can choose a gender, and then their biology has to match the gender that they assume that they have. And so they take measures such as hormone therapy, gender reconstruction, and so on and so forth. And these can be very damaging. Of course, it's psychologically damaging, but damaging in so many different levels. But look at the question now. This person said, I've accepted Islam in the middle of this. So when I go to the masjid, do I go to the ladies' side or the men's side? When I go to the masjid, where do I pray? What am I supposed to do? This is a question that I've never heard in my life. So I consulted people. I considered mashayikh. They never heard of this question before. And so they were really stuck, right? Now, to make a long story short, I was able, I put this person in contact and so on and so forth, but I still do not know how you would navigate this space in terms of that particular question. My point in bringing this up is we have so many issues that are in the society around us that many of us might not even be aware of. And they're knocking on the gates of our communities. And we have an option. We have an option to be like the ostrich. Sapiens Institute. And we deal with issues related to doubts in Islam. Whether these doubts are about atheism, feminism, postmodernism, and all sorts of other isms that are out there. But the point is that we have to start dealing with these things and get a step ahead of them before they start break down the doors of our communities, and all of a sudden we have children, which, by the way, is already happening. Anymore. Why did the Prophet say Y and Z? And I don't find it morally correct to do this and that. All right? Too much. Now, we said we're going to make this the way we can work. This can work is that I can throw questions at you guys and have you guys Or I can give you some more questions, but the thing is, I'm not going to answer them. I'm going to pick on people. You want me to ask the questions? Oh, you want to ask me the questions? Okay. All right. Bismillah. So who's going to go first? Yes. Yep. I put them in contact with someone because to be really honest, I didn't know the answer. Yes. Some of us here have kids in high school. Yep. And they come back home with similar things. Yep. My girl came back one day and said there was a boy that chooses to dress, chooses his dress depending on his mood. Okay. Sometimes he wears crop top, Yep. With lipstick. Sure. He's allowed to come into the ladies' restroom. Brilliant. Okay. So there are real issues. It's not so far away. Yeah. So okay. So I think the question is more about gender identity and gender fluidity, right? At least that's what I'm getting from your question, right? How do we? Well, first of all, Islamically, do we actually believe in a dichotomy of genders? Let's be very clear that there's a male and there's a female, that they're real. A man is a man and a woman is a woman. Is that real? Okay, good. Alhamdulillah. I didn't hear everyone though. Does everyone agree that's real? Okay, alhamdulillah. Laysa dhakaru kal untha, right? Not like the female. Allah mentioned it as well in case we might forget. Okay? So now the question is that how do we now deal with this in a way that a young person can navigate the space? A young person can express themselves and say, look, I don't really agree that gender can be fluid. Okay? Now, one thing is that we have to understand that having vocabulary, having the kind of the language in which young people are speaking, and I don't want to say young people that are in this space, it's really important. Okay? So first of all, we know that they make a distinction between gender and sex. Okay? So they say there's a difference between biological sex, what you are born biologically, and what is your gender? How do you feel inside? All right? So one very clear way of just kind of taking it on is saying, look, how does one determine sex, biological sex? Well, that has to do with biological organs, right? If you're born with a certain biological organ, that is your, let's say, a male, and if you have another organ, you are a female. But what they would argue then is gender is different, though. Gender is how you are inside. Are you a woman inside? Or are you a man inside? Okay? Now look, I was thinking about the footsteps of shaitan. Like, 10 years ago, we used to take serious issues, right? Now, shaitan goes really slow. And now we've come to the point where we're actually having this at a campfire discussion. But that being said, the question then arises is, how do you know what gender you are if you disconnect it from your biology? So someone may say, it's because I know how I feel. Well, how do you know that? Like if I said, I feel like a woman, how do I know that? How could you possibly explain that? You'd say, okay, well, society determines that. That would be the next response. But the problem is that someone that holds this opinion to say that society determines this is also going to say that society's norms are incorrect. Because society has given us these norms of male and female that, for instance, that, females are weaker than men. That's a societal issue. And society's wrong. So if society can't determine your gender, then what can? It's just an open feeling. It's just that's how I feel. And so now this can get into all sorts of areas. Well, I don't, I was a teaching assistant for a class at UT. It was with Dr. Leonard Moore. And we were talking about the issue of transgenderism. And he asked a question. So UT, for those of you guys who don't know, UT Austin, very liberal school. All right. So they're very much into like transgenderism and all these other issues. And so this class that he teaches, it's called the Black Power movement. Very interesting class. It's one of the most popular classes on campus. And so this class has 500 people that you can come, and then there's standing room only. This is how popular this class is. So he asked a question in the class. He said, how many people agree with transgenderism? A lot of people raise their hands. He said, how many people agree with transracialism? You see the problem? Right? Like, if you can choose to be a woman just because you feel like it, can I choose to be what color I want to be just because I feel like it? So the logical implications are that it logically leads you nowhere. Okay? So one of the things to understand is that from just a pure rational point of view, it's not going to get you anywhere. But the second problem is that this doesn't become a rational issue. This becomes more of a pseudo-political issue. And what do I mean by that? So the concept of transgenderism has its root in what we call postmodernism, right? This is the lecture part of it now, right? So postmodernism, the way this works is they say that, look, the reason why you're pointing towards logic is because your mind has been colonized. Okay? Because the European milieu, logic and science, that's because of their own cultural background. And just because we should use logic and science and so forth, we don't have to, because we have our own personal experiences. And so this gets into issues of like race and things like that. Like, you can't tell me my racial experience, living in wherever it is in Houston, where, like, let's say there's a majority African American community. So now you have this idea of personal experience being the justification. Logic and, let's say, rationality have to be taken and put on the side. You can't tell me my personal experience. All right. So if you can't use logic and rationality, you can only use personal experience. Where are you supposed to go with that? So it's not a rhetorical question. What would you do with that? What do you think? It's going to be more chaos, right? That's a good point. What else? You can't reason with someone. So then, now what do you do next? It's game over, right? I mean, where are you supposed to go if you have nothing that you can come to common terms with? And what's really interesting is that when young people come with this, and you take them to this kind of all the way to the logical conclusion and say, look, you have to do away with logic and reasoning, and therefore, do you think that's a good idea? Hopefully, they'll say no, right? But if not, well, then you've got another battle on your hands, right? And Allah knows best. All right. So hopefully that gave you some food for thought. And if you're interested in more, we actually have a course called No Doubt 10 Strategies to deal with yours and other people's doubts. This course will be online for free, and we're taking it to different communities. And so you can go to sapiensinstitute.org/no doubt. And if you'd like to have it in your community, we can be more than happy for free to bring it to your communities, right? But I'm just giving you a little bit of a taste of some of the issues and then how to deal with some of those issues. All right. What other questions do we have? Yes, Bismillah. I wouldn't be surprised. I know there's a trans. I thought there was one in California, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Governor, can you move that?
Oh, you.
Assalamu alaikum. The first part of the question is he aware that there's transgender masjid in New York? He said he's not too sure, but he thinks there's one in California. It doesn't matter where it is. So the question from that is, what kind of Muslim sects that are coming up with that kind of, is it mainframe Sunni Muslim, or combination of those, or?
Okay. Is that the only, or is that, you have more?
Yeah, or people that get converted into Islam, or because sometimes I would be like technology. The Jews can go to any extent to come up with something to discredit Islam. So I just want you to have that in mind while you are answering the question.
Jazakallah khair. So let me just say, I don't know if it's a very specific Muslim. Yeah, well, unfortunately. But the thing is, look, while I understand where your question is coming from, right? This is a certain group, we need to kind of, deal with that. I think what's perhaps more important than that is equipping people with the necessary spiritual, what we call epistemic, right, tools to be able to directly deal with that, right? So that when those confusions are, because those confusions, you may have a masjid that's doing that. But even before the masjid, many of our young people are in school for like 8 hours a day. So the masjid may not be the biggest problem. The biggest problem is 8 hours a day, they're having to accept this worldview, right? So I think from that perspective, it becomes important that we highlight what are the foundations and how do we deal with it Islamically, all right? Let me just give you a little tidbit. From the Islamic worldview, we know that every single human being is born upon the fitrah. Everybody knows this, right? I hope. So what is the fitrah? Someone help me out. What do we mean by the fitrah? Islam, okay. Anybody else? Born as a Muslim? What else? What's that? Natural cause. Okay, good. So we have natural cause, born as a Muslim, Islam. What else? Anybody else? Nature? Okay. What's that? Consciousness. That's an interesting one. Consciousness is, no, that's really good because from a, what they call an ontological point of view, the ontology of the soul, consciousness is actually tied to something we call the ruah. But I don't have the time to get into that right now, right? But it's a good one. Consciousness is a good one. What else? Inclination to do good. Okay. Anybody else? Purity. Okay. Yeah. So you had something to say in the moral realism. So maybe more of a moral compass might be a better definition or part of the definition. So let me give a succinct definition, right? Because all of these aren't necessarily incorrect. But when we think about the fitrah, we could give a quick definition to say that it is the original normative disposition. Okay? Now, I'm using these three words very carefully and specifically. When we say original, this is the original state that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created every human being upon. Right? It is the fitrah, the natural state, or the state, the original, the starting point that every human being was created upon. In fact, some theologians, scholars argue that everything in everything has a fitrah. Okay? So it's original. It's the starting point. Number two, normative. Now again, remember I was talking about using the language of the people that we are talking to. Normative, you can just equate it to mean normal. Okay? There's different ways of understanding normative. Normative could be versus descriptive and so on. But let's just say normal. This is the normal way a human being is supposed to be. If you saw a person walking around upside down, you would not say that's normal. You would say that is crazy, abnormal, right? So the normal state that a person is supposed to be on, this is what we also call the fitrah, which is the original normative. Okay? The last part of the definition, disposition. It is that, and there's two ways of looking at that, that either that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put within the person the knowledge of Allah, His existence, and the fact that He is worthy of worship, or He is, the second way of understanding that is that He has given us a means to recognize that. That means to recognize the truth, that is also a part of the fitrah. So philosophically, if someone were to say, well, we want to look at these concepts of, how do we know certain things and so on and so forth, you have to say, you have to have a starting point, always. For the Muslim, the starting point is the fitrah. Okay? So number one, let's get a really philosophical question. Why should we want to know truth? Is truth important? What's that? No, why? What's the purpose of knowing truth? Like, what if I say I don't care about the truth? Halas. The point is that very idea that truth is a virtue has to have a starting point. For the Muslim, that starting point is the fitrah. You have an inclination to know things to be true, want to know truth, have conversations where you're looking for the truth. That very motivation to look for the truth is part of the human being. And whether people want to accept it or not, that's every human being. Hatta even animals. Like, right, there's, you know, when a cat is about to like jump over a certain distance, in its mind, it has to make a distinction. Am I going to make it over this distance or not? Either it's true I can make it over the distance, or it's not true. So in some sort of basic way, it is the natural state upon the human being. Everyone wants to be looking for the truth. So far, so good? All right. That's the fitrah. All right. That's the natural state everyone is born upon. All right. The original normative disposition. All right. And like I said, we get into a lot more details related to this. How does the intellect work with this? What is the limits of rationality and so on and so forth? It's a bit out of the scope. That being the case, why did I bring that up? Because the second part of that definition is normative. Normal. So when we deal with issues with like transgenderism, we have to bring in the concept of normality. Correct? To be normal, okay? There has to be a standard to be normal. What is that standard? The fitrah, Islam, being Muslim, and so on and so forth. If there's no standard, this puts everything else into flux. Does that make sense, or am I just kind of, I don't want to be talking over people. Yeah? Okay, good. All right. What other questions do we have? Let's leave the transgenderism stuff. We can get into that in the course, inshallah. Let's get into some other stuff. Or I can throw some stuff out.
Jazakallah khairan. Before I go to my question, I want to give a little bit of preamble. Alhamdulillah, I got to know the story of people of Lut from my childhood. Alhamdulillah. So how Allah dealt with them in the Quran. Okay. Now. So Alhamdulillah, I got to know the story of Prophet Lut and how Allah dealt with his people. So I didn't know that people like gay, lesbians exist in my tribe. Like I'm from the western part of Nigeria, the Yoruba tribe. Alhamdulillah. So I didn't know until I got to Muslim majority states, Kano states. And by the way, the Kano state in Nigeria, Sharia is being practiced. So I got to know them for the first time, so maybe over a decade ago. Now, when I was in national assignment. So when I got there, so I was like, subhanallah. So gay, lesbians, all this sort of stuff can be existing in this part of the world. Muslim majority. Please note that. Now, when I got to the Middle East, in Qatar, so I was offered rights several times by the gays.
Offered what?
Offer rights, like they gave me rights.
Okay.
Yeah. Permit me with my assets. So now I got confused that subhanallah, how come in the Muslim communities that we're having this kind of stuff? So I was having a conversation with my daughter, 15-year-old, alhamdulillah, and she showed me a video from TikTok. She watched the lecture on Muslim
TikTok.
Muslim gays, something like that. Somebody was debunking their allegations that Islam is too harsh on gays and this. So we're having a conversation. I said, okay, so this is acceptable to certain extent. Now, I'm happy that we have the younger folks in our midst this morning. So if someone comes to me and says, I am a Muslim and I'm a gay, so how do we deal with such a person in our community?
Okay. So,
Bismillah
ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So to summarize the question, someone comes and says, look, I'm Muslim and I'm gay, what do I do? Right? So the thing is, there's a number of surrounding things or extra information that you need, right? You need to know about the person's background. Like this is just a general rule with anyone that brings you any question, right? Let's say a non-Muslim comes to you with a question, anything. It's important to always know what is the person's background. right? Is this person asking because they've understood the ruling from Islamic point of view? That's a different person than someone that no believe it's okay in Islam. That's a different question, right? What is this person's worldview? How do they the world? Is it kind of a liberal that has lenses by which they look at the world? Or is it truly Islam the way they look at the world? So it's say this and then boom, we but there's no right? So you have to consider you do, right? Their background, their psycho-spiritual state. What are their so it's a good question. It's just not one that I can say, here's the answer, this is what you do. Because there are variables you have to consider. That being said, I would explore the see what the background is. And then start to formulate how you're going to use right? And one always. Someone presents us with a question, we think I have the rational answer, I'll give it to them, knock them over.
I've seen in the workforce where colleagues are putting pronouns in their names, right? E, they, them.
Yeah.
How do we advise them on the kind of conversation that, are you accepting that this is normal? Because I see a Muslim that is even doing the same thing as well too. Is that part of us accepting that, okay, I want some individual to be addressed pronouns?
So there's a couple of things here. If this is happening, okay, so if this is happening in the workforce, one of the things to keep in consideration is that what are the limits of the job that you have, right? Because obviously you want to keep your job, right? So, you know, if it's part of company policy to not speak about these things, then really, you don't really have much of an option. If this person is okay to speak about it, let's say outside of company hours, then again, I don't know if the best thing to do is to talk about specifically pronouns. Okay, and I'll tell you why. So if you're going to have a take-home point for this session, this is going to be it. You guys ready? Okay. Every single person that you speak to, every single person, forget that you speak to, every single person has a worldview, has lenses by which to see the world. And so based on the lenses that they have, they're going to make conclusions about a multitude of things. So you ask them their opinion about abortion. There's a certain set of lenses that they're going to be looking through in order to give you that opinion. All right? If there's a question about what do you think about, I don't know, critical race theory, there are a set of lenses that you're looking through in order to give you the answer. So before you start dealing with the question of pronouns or transgenderism, you have to deal with the lenses that they're wearing. Okay, now what do I mean by this? Just like, you know, if you think about glasses, if someone is wearing a set of green glasses, like the lenses are green, you could argue till you're blue in the face that something is red, and they believe you. Right? It's only until they have the lenses that are red that they'll see it's red, or clear lenses, let's say. Ah, yes, the true color is red of this particular thing. So you actually have to deal with the lenses before you deal with the specific problem, in many cases, okay? So when we say worldview, what do we mean by worldview? First of all, does everyone have a worldview? Yes? No? What do you think? Who said no? Exactly. Listen to this carefully. Every single person has a worldview. No one can be without a worldview. Nobody. Just like every person has a language, right? Everyone speaks a language, right? Even if they don't actually verbalize it with sound, there's still a language that they're using to speak it, right? Now, it could be sign language, but every person has a language. No one is less. Right. I'm looking at this person, I'm looking, but at every single point, I'm looking at the direction. Right? And so just like the direction, everyone has a language, everyone has a worldview. Components of that worldview. Meaning, I'm going to make a judgment. There are certain things I understand about reality. Does that tree exist? Do I exist? Does the world exist? These are known as ontological questions. What is and what is not. Okay? Everyone has some sort of opinion about that. Okay? Now, there's an opinion about God existing. That's an ontological question. Does God exist, or does he not exist? Okay? Based on your answer, you go from ontology to what's known as theology. And then you talk about who is God, what are his attributes, subhanahu wa ta'ala, so on and so forth. Okay? But the first part of a worldview is your ontology. What exists and what does not exist. This is number one. Number two, a second component of your worldview is what we call epistemology. Don't worry about the terms. How do you know what you know? How do you know what is true? What are your sources of knowledge? Is it just observation? Is it the say-so of others? How do you know something to be true versus something to be not true? Right? So there is a worldview that says the only way to knowledge is by way of empiricism, by testing, the scientific method. That's one worldview, but that's a part of how do you know what is true. The Islamic answer to how do you know what is true is the sources of knowledge, the natural world and revelation. But from the Islamic worldview, that level, that component is, we say, two sources. Many people that have a worldview that the only way I can know truth is by way of my observation. Some people will say, I don't accept testimony. You believe in hadith? No. Why not? Well, how do we know what we said, and how can we trust the say-so of others? That is a weak way of knowing what is and what is not. But then you can challenge that person. You can say, even in the realm of science, did you make all the experiments yourself, or did you study the research from the say-so of somebody else? In order to make progress, even if your worldview is science, your epistemology has to rely on the say-so of somebody else. Correct? So testimony is foundation to how you know what you know. And as a Muslim, I'm not saying different. I'm just giving you an example of epistemology. Then you have anthropology. I don't mean what does it mean? What is composed of the soul, or is it just material matter? All right? If it's just material matter, how do we understand the human being? How do we understand things like consciousness? Someone mentioned that, right? That's part of anthropology. And the answer to that question is going to determine your worldview. What about teleology? Purpose. Does this universe have a purpose? Do I have a purpose? What is the purpose? Is there no purpose? Your answer to that question is going to determine your worldview. And then after you've gone through all those parts, then on the issues of things like morality, what's just and unjust. It's based on the first four areas before you say, yes, I agree with abortion. No, I agree with it. Everyone with me so far? Once you get there, you start politics, right? All of those talk about, right? Beauty. Something that people don't think about. What do you consider beautiful? Our community, society will tell you what their worldview is. understand that, you're going to run issues with transgenderism, atheism, all isms. This is not clear for ourselves, and then clarifying for the person you're speaking to. You're going to be going in circles because they're going to be having those red lenses or green lenses. I don't remember. I forgot what I said. Green lenses, and you're going to tell them that this is red. You're going to be going around in circles. All right? Yes, go ahead. Sorry for that short khutbah. Yeah. Okay. Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much. I'm very happy you went into Hadith, and I've been sitting over there harping on those guys, those beautiful youth we have over there to listen to you, because this has a lot to do with them. My question was about Hadith you talk about. It's something hard. I've seen the very first person that wrote it. I asked if I was supposed something to him more different from him. So some of us were born into Islam, and they're like, I'm just gonna do what they say. I take the chance and hopefully go to Jannah. For some of these guys, and the fact is, the first person that commented that is secret, truth, was born 208 years after passing of the Holy Prophet. Now 6,000. So how do you explain that?
So this is actually a really good question, and it goes back to my point. Because there's certain assumptions within the question, right? Number one, the assumption is the only way that we know about a testimony is by way of written documentation. Correct? Okay. But I'm going to say that I don't think so. I think you can build testimony that is more powerful and more strict and more certain than just written testimony. Again, this goes back to a worldview. Under the, you can say, let's say, Judeo-Christian worldview, when it comes to establishing things like the veracity of the Bible, they are stuck with how do we have written text, because there's no tradition, there's no oral tradition, right? The Jews have an oral tradition, but there's no systematic oral tradition like we have within Hadith methodology and so forth. Now, Usul Hadith is outside the scope of this, but I recommend some books if you'd like. So Dr. Jonathan Brown has a book on Hadith, right? The methodology of how it's collected. But just one simple way of just thinking about an oral tradition versus a written tradition, again, going back to understanding the Islamic worldview on this, is that when we think about written tradition, the reason why people say, oh, it's not like, it's the oral tradition, they bring up something like telephone. Anyone know what the game telephone is? You know, you like whisper something in someone's ear, and by the time you come back around, it's something completely different. So I whisper, shh, donkey, and it comes back around, and it was dog. It's completely different, right? Which is fine in the telephone game, but Hadith collection was never like that on an oral basis, okay? So there's a distinguishing characteristic between Hadith that are known as mutawatir and Hadith that are known as ahad. Mutawatir is that there's so many people that narrated a particular Hadith, it's impossible for someone to have come up with it, right? So like if I asked you, is the world round? What do you think? Okay, how many people think the world is round? It's a sphere, right? Okay. How do you know that? Yes, we already know that. Okay, good. No, stay with that. Did you go outside of this earth and see it? No, you didn't. So how do you know that information? Picture. Okay. Did you take the picture? Oh, it's okay. Right. So who took it? How do you trust them? Who are they? The point is that there's so many people. Yeah. Right. So my point is that we know the world is round not by direct exposure, but the fact that it was testimony that has established, and so much testimony. You sound like the world is flat, right? That's what I'm trying to distinguish between what the world is. There's so many narratives, it's impossible that it could have been made up, right? And so on. So all of that falls within hadith methodology, and it requires a little bit of study. And one of the things that ulama say is that you will never find a system like the system of hadith in any other tradition, whether we're talking about a religious tradition or a secular tradition. Even within, let's say, research analysis today, within science, within whatever field, psychology, whatever it might be, the person you're taking your information from, you have no clue about who they are. You don't know their character, you don't know if they had an affair, you don't know nothing. All you know is right? But are we trying to say that has absolutely no impact on the results they're presenting? Of course it does. Just look at worldviews. A person's worldview is going to have an impact even on things that we consider objective and scientific, right? So I hope that kind of answered that. All right.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. Jazakallah khair. I have enjoyed a series of lectures. A couple of times you came to give us lectures at Maghrib and stuff like that. Jazakallah khair. So the ayah you started with from Surah Al-Rum, the continuation of that ayah says, La tabdila li khalqillah. So that is, we should not change the creation of Allah, no matter what. So, and we know that when it comes to this argument of transgenderism, usually the thought starts coming from when some kids, get to the formative age, early teens, middle school, high school, and, they get to colleges and stuff like that. So, and the parents might not really know what's really going on. They might not have had any conversation with them and stuff like that. So, somebody who was really, so what are the signs that parents should be aware of, they should be thinking of to catch this? And even like imams in the community now, if this kind of thought is brought to them, the parents don't know how to go about it. So what are the ways we can really nip this at the bud so that before it becomes so serious? Because we know it is going around now. And some of our youth, they are getting indoctrinated when they get to schools, high schools, colleges, and it is in the process of freedom to do whatever you like. This freedom is becoming excessively intoxicated. People are doing all sorts of things now, and that's why some people now, it is when they are almost giving up the ghost at the sick bed, it is too late before I go for COVID vaccination and stuff like that. So people are taking this freedom, this liberty to the extreme. So as parents, as imams, what are the early warning signs we can really start watching out for? Because we know it has to do with thought, but we don't see this. You don't see when we see it manifested. So what are the early warning signs we can catch, and how can we go about getting to the bottom of it? Jazakallah khair.
Well, yeah. Actually, that's an excellent question. So I'll do another shameless plug. So the course we're talking about is for parents, it's for young people, and it's for imams as well. Imams and shaykhs, leaders of the community. Why? Because we're not saying that imams and shaykhs don't have the knowledge. How do you contemporize that knowledge? How do you make it relevant is what the course actually does, right? Again, the language of the people that you are speaking with is very important, right? And so just another shameless plug, check out the course. I think we'll be doing it in Houston at some point. I know, I think at BHA, we have a schedule for October 15th, the Brighter Horizons Academy, and then we have a couple, maybe Masjid-ul, other places. So look out for it. That being said, one of the things that we deal with in the course is how to recognize some of the signs, right? So one of the things that that we know is that a lot of times we think that these problems are coming from high school. The last 3 to 4 years, most of the normative state, right? I was talking about normative, isn't actually a phenomena of high school per se. It's a phenomenon of engagement online. And if you think about it, what this means is that if someone has unfettered access to the internet, in other words, we don't really care what our kids are doing. They've got a screen, they're in their room, whatever, spend as much time as they want. There's no sort of limitations, right? If that's the case, then they can end up at sites that are very detrimental. right? And this, by the way, this is not just a angry Muslim parent, how dare my kids, and I'm going to shut off the internet. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, this is coming from Western research. They said in the last, 2 years, they've seen an uptake of young girls getting into the transgender issue, an uptake of 2,000%, and they trace it back to this certain culture of transgenderism that's online and prevalent. A lot of the most popular YouTubers you have out there with millions of followers are filling, people's ears with all sorts of things, right? And certain ideologies and a certain worldview, right? Again, I was talking about worldviews. So understanding that the problem isn't only the interactions in high school. Believe it or not, some of the teachers, non teachers, are trying to deal with the issues as much as you are. My wife teaches high school. She's 11th grade U.S. history. So, he's come up to me and said, and the girl today, and she said, I know you've been knowing me as Julie, but now you need to call me Frank or whatever. Right? She's like, how do I deal with that? I'm like, good luck. No, I'm kidding. But when you look at current research in this area, a lot of this is coming from the unfettered access to the internet, more than is coming from the influence of high school itself, right? And again, when you look at kind of what is being said online, so a lot of these, let's say, popular figures within the transgender community, if someone is having, let's say, growing pains, look, every person, when you go through puberty, you're going to be confused about stuff. That's normal, right? It's in your life, right? The problem is that when you're confused and you're like, what do I do about this? If someone comes and says, look, the reason you're confused is because you might be confused about your gender. And here's how my life is so wonderful, having recognized that and changed my gender. All right. Now, I just said it kind of in a quick way, but what I'm saying is, if this is happening over time, then pretty soon you see the ramifications of this. You see the effects of it. Right? And one of the effects that other research is talking about is you have young girls that are getting surgery, and hormone therapy, right? HRT therapy, and so on and so forth, hormone therapy. And where are they getting this information from? They're 13, 14, 15. They haven't fully matured. They don't know the concept of a sexual experience. And yet, they're making conclusions that are going to damage their life. And this, again, I'm not talking about Muslims here, I'm talking about non-Muslims that are identifying these issues. So, one of the things I would say, and there's other things, is to see, what's going on online. How much time is my child spending online? How much time outside and engage with the natural world? Because that has a deep, profound spiritual, psychological influence on a person, right? So when I started, I said, I'm very happy to see everyone here. Not only am I happy to see everyone's faces, the fact that we are in the natural world has a profound impact on how we are. Right? So, right? Having time with the family where you're actually having dinner and conversations is really important. Looking, and this is one that parents are like, looking at your own engagement with the phone. How much time are we spending on the phone? Just work email, just give me back, just hold on a second, just go. That's going to happen to your child, right? So your own ability to take this device, put it down, and spend some quality time. Right? You cannot imagine what's have on cell phones and calm that down, and then also look at what kids are doing, what the community is doing, how and so on.
Thank you.
So we have one more question here, and then I think.
He has his hand up. Who you want to ask?
Yeah. Sure.
So you want to use them right now? They can identify them now. So can.
By the way, I can hang out afterwards if you guys want.
Okay.
Okay. You can talk to me afterwards if you want.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, Jazakallah khair. The topic of today, I think, what is doubt about Islam. And the question is asked about someone coming up to one and saying he is confused or he has made his mind or her mind about a position that he or she is a gay or she's a lesbian and so on, and she's also a Muslim or transgender and so on. How do we approach it? Of course, you paint a scenario. Just there are many ways to approach it. Is it a conclusive statement or just doubt? That's the approach. But of course, maybe time does not permit. Each item would have loved to have what do you do? In case, for example, it's already made up his or her mind, and so on and so forth. But again, from personal experience, okay, which I think will be very relevant, the answer is perfectly okay. There's no one size fits all. Okay, I mean that's from personal experience. Someone helped to me. I want to be a lecturer, okay, but just to let you know that yes, I've had that experience and engage. Okay, you have to listen and then understand where the person comes from, and then if you can, you have the knowledge, then you approach in the same way, and hopefully, you can, get the person to the right direction. In this particular case, alhamdulillah, the person actually came back to Islam and even practiced beyond, but who said, no, sorry, don't waste your time. You cannot convince me. He said that to my face. Don't waste your time. You can convince me because I've had my research. I'm convinced, but even that you don't give up, okay? But anyway, so each situation differs. So you have to engage. If you have the ability, go ahead and engage. If you don't, refer to the person. Like I said, you refer to somebody to somebody. You can to refer about confusion about hadith. You rightly answered just one point I want to mention as well. The companions if you look at what they are narrating the hadith, you see, after has passed on, right? And said something happened, and one of the companions say, "Okay, I heard the prophet say this." What is it? So that is, so you're talking about documentation, maybe written. Of course, I have also evidence that even it came much earlier than that. But you will also understand that yes, hadith has been transmitted. It's been, practicalized much earlier, even during the life of Prophet himself. Is it about the mut'ah? The mut'ah? Some of the companions say, "So no, I heard this." No, so no, in Khaybar is already, forbidden in Khaybar. These companions speaking among themselves. Prophet was not there. Transmitting what? The hadith. So if you look at it that way, you realize that hadith has been, of course, Prophet actually forbade, the companions from documenting at the beginning, documenting that not to confuse with the what? With the Quran. A lot of things to be said about it, but there's no confusion about that at all. That hadith, and what the content that is repeated, that content most likely is not forged. But again, what about the Islam? What almost all the document what is the narrator's chain of narrators. They look at them not about the content, but about it, and I have to do what the content on that. So gay and lesbian, the question I have, I mentioned that already. The question I have is, for abnormal birth. You can say abnormal because in your definition of fitra, you say normative is one of those, right? Of course, we have cases of abnormal birth. You have the she-male, they call them. Okay, they did not make it up themselves. It happened to them, and they become who they are. They are growing, beard for female, and then male having, breast and this. So how do we handle that? This is what I want you to address, and also abnormality as well in birth. Maybe the reproductive part is not developed properly, and so on. This is not the person's making. That is different than someone who thinks he wants to change his gender because of inner feeling. Okay, so how do we address that? Assalamu alaikum.
Do you want to address or take the next question?
Let me just address the last point very quickly, and that is that there's no doubt that you have what they call a female whatever it might be. Those are issues that ulama dealt with, right? They said, okay, so this person is in this particular state, what were they born with? What are the conditions? And then they choose a gender, right? To make it very easy upon the person. So like you mentioned, that's a different case. And in fact, those cases are not the majority, not even close to the majority, right? Those are specific cases, but the ulama have dealt with that, right? In the sense that this person was born in this state. Let's see where they're, let's say, are they born with certain organs, and what are those organs? And then they choose a certain gender, and then they move on. That's a different issue than what we're facing today. So it's important. But I'm glad you brought it up, because it's important not to conflate it. People might say, well, look, you have all of this in Islam, right? You have all this, but it's two different things, right? Allah knows best.
So, sorry. Just to add more point to what you've said, what is very common when a child is born at birth? Sorry, because I have the background of a Hebrew. So when the child is born, what we normally say is what we call ambiguous genitalia. Because whenever the baby comes out, the very first thing people want to say is, what kind of sex is this? What we are talking about ambiguous genitalia is, if it is that of a male, it will be very clear. You will say it. If it is a female sex, you will also say it. But when we call ambiguous genitalia, you can't differentiate. You will have what is apparent like that of a female, and you will have a little bit of rudimentary organ that will also appear on top like that of a male. So when it happens like that, from a pediatrician point of view, what we will do is, after 2 weeks, we will do some tests to know, number one, is this child a male or a female? If we do the hormonal panel and it comes out as XY, that is clear male. So later on, they will do reconstructive surgery to take care of that private part, to make the male organ come out very well. And if after 2 weeks the hormonal test is done and it is predominantly female, XX, then they will also do the same surgery. It is clear. And after a while, they will be given some hormonal medication to kind of suppress the ambiguity, so that the one that is prominent will really come out very well, develop very well, and suppress the one that is not. However, if one is clearly a male or female at birth, there is no ambiguity in that. And later on during development, puberty, we now see that this is a female, but we have the chest here, we have beard, and we have all sorts of things. That is purely hormonal imbalance. It has nothing to do with your sex. Use of medication to take care of that. So, because some people will be hiding, I thought I was a male, but now I see I'm like, it is hard for a male to start menstruating. It is very hard. And it is very hard for a female to start making semen. It is very hard. But what we normally see is, maybe at puberty, we now see a female having chest hair and stuff like that. We will give some hormonal medication and that will be taken care of.
So I have a question. I know I'm taking a question, but I have a question now. Spark my mind. Do you have like researchers like that?
I will find out.
That'd be good.
Yes, I will get your email, inshallah. Inshallah.
I think we have been talking about the gays, lesbians, and transgender. It's very easy to say it and discuss it here. What is advice for people that work with them, day in and day out? Because I have several experience
2 decades ago, I worked with okay. Recently, I'm working with trans, and it's very hard for me for the maybe 3 months to accept or call the person's name. And even though I'm working with the person right now on projects, how do we deal with that? What advice do you have?
So, like, I think someone else had asked a similar question, and that what I would say is that you have to really look at your company policy. Like, what does your company, what sort of standards does your company have? Also, look at the recognition that if you decide to call a person different gender, what are happen to work person go file a claim, get in trouble? Because if that's the case, then you're working environment. Right? We're not judgment. Like I said, talk about the issue. That's something like a work. You're rules and regulations. You're bound by your work culture, right? For better, for worse. I don't want to say something like, "Well, go find another job," and that's not really something that a lot of people can really do, right? So I'll say you basically have to play it by ear and see what the culture is. I know it's uncomfortable. I mean, my wife had that, and she basically said, she told, because it was a young person, she said, "Look, I'm going to call you Julie," and that's it, right? Like, whatever you want to be called, But because she's a teacher, she can do that in the great state of Texas. She can do that, right? Because parents are not doing that. But in other places, other work environments, maybe there's a more liberal culture, right? So if she's teaching, let's say, New York City, or like Northern Virginia, she may not be able to do the same thing. So again, it's really going to depend on work culture, all that, But I just wish that were clear.
Someone quickly, what's that course you were talking about one more time?
So if you go to Sapiens Institute, deal with your or other people's doubts. Okay. 10 specific strategies. One of the strategies is to study Islam. A lot of times we make conclusions without actually studying it. So that gets the Writer Horizons Academy in Northern Houston. It's not a close to Tomball, BHA, if you're familiar with it. So we're having it there on the October week. Friday. We're also scheduling